Well, here we are. Good afternoon to everyone. I'm TJ Halverson with the DeAngelis Group, executive search firm that serves the musculoskeletal industry. Today, we welcome you all to another edition of MSK Innovations, where we welcome 3 innovative companies to present their technologies and opportunities to a distinguished panel. Provide our panelists with a quick opportunity. Take a minute to introduce yourself. We'll start with you, Dr. Paul Slozar. Would you please introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. My name is Paul Slozar. I practiced orthopedic spine surgery in the San Francisco Bay Area for 28 years. During that time, I had the chance to consult with a number of early stage companies, primarily in spine, and then worked as the chief medical officer for Titan Spine for 11 years until it was acquired in 2019. I stopped clinical practice 2 years ago. I currently work in the consulting space with startups, some in spine, some in med tech, and have also begun working with a venture capital firm. And we founded a venture capital firm aimed at having physicians as our primary limited partner investors. And our goal will be to invest in healthcare technologies in the seed and Series A space. Thanks for having me.
Great. Yeah, we're happy to have you. Next, Paul Som from Zimmer Biomet. Paul, would you give a quick introduction?
Yeah, so I guess I'm the other Paul. So Paul Som with Zimmer Biomet. I'm an engineer by training. I was telling TJ and the rest of the group a little bit, I have what I call a bit of a reverse career. So pertinent to this discussion, out of undergrad, worked for 2 different medical device startups, one in the cardiology space, one in the prostate cancer therapy space. I managed to drive both of them out of business within about 3 years of starting to the day. Went back to business school to try and figure out exactly what made companies like yours successful. Started what I thought was going to be a 3 or 5 year stint with a large company before getting back into the entrepreneurship focus. Landed with what was then Abbott Spine when Abbott Laboratories decided they wanted to get into orthopedics. Started there in 2005. They rapidly decided they wanted to stay the hell away from orthopedics. Sold the business to Zimmer in 2008. And I've been with Zimmer and Zimmer Biomet ever since in a variety of strategic planning and business development roles. Have basically supported all of our business units outside of large recon at one point in time or another. We obviously no longer have, well, maybe not obviously everyone, but we no longer have a spine business as part of Zimmer Biomet, but have spent a decade or so with spine organization and responsibilities before, so have some familiarity there.
Yeah, no, we're very happy to have you, Paul. And last but by no means least, Chris Lyons. Will give you a minute to tell part
Sure.
of long history.
So I've been in the musculoskeletal industry about 36 years now. Started in Richards Medical that became Smith & Nephew. And then I joined Medtronic. Most of my roles had always been marketing and sales, and joined Medtronic Spine. That was 2005, and took over all their mergers and acquisitions from 2008 until 2017. All that time on the buy side, I learned a ton. And I learned a lot, not only because of that, but because of the companies that I was on a regular scheduled basis of having discussions with. It's like drinking from a fire hose. So I started in 2017, my operation, which is Southern Metrics Consulting, and I'm heavily involved in business lifecycle management for startups. And basically everything from fundraising all the way through to strategy, building a data room, doing discounted cash flow analyses, and negotiating their exits. I've had 3 successful ones so far since 2017, and excited to be here and to contribute to the discussions.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Well, now before I introduce our first presenter, quick disclaimer, MSK Innovations, we are not a broker-dealer or an investment advisor. This is for informational purposes only and not to be considered investment advice. Please conduct your own due diligence prior to making any investment. Now to our first presenter from Israel, a late night for Ofer Levy from ZygoFix. Ofer, take it away.
Good afternoon. Nice disclaimer. Good afternoon or good night to me. It's 12 midnight here. So like I said, I've done 20 push-ups and drank some coffee, so I'm good to go. Let me just share my screen. All right. Here we go. So good afternoon. My name is Ofer Levy. I'm the CEO of ZygoFix, and we've developed an internal facet fixation system. It's a very exciting time for us because we have just obtained our FDA clearance, initial clearance a few months ago, and another one in September. So the exciting news is that ZygoFix is coming to America. There's a lot of, this is giving us a great momentum. There's a lot of discussions going on. We see some interest from industry. We see some interest from spine surgeons. So very exciting time. So internal facet fixation. As we all know, the standard of care posterior stabilization system today is the pedicle screw construct, which essentially means placing 4 screws, connecting them with 2 rigid rods, and creating 2 artificial bridges in the segment. Internal facet fixation relies on our natural bone structure. By locking motion in the facet joint, we can obtain the required stability for fusion in a much simpler and less invasive way. But here's the anatomical challenge. Facet joints are not straight, and their articulation changes greatly from one instance to another. So a rigid implant is not suitable. All other internal facet fusion systems in the market are rigid. So in order to place them in the joint must be drilled through, rimmed, or both. Here's our unique solution. Our implant is designed as a combination of rigid and bendable elements. The implant is designed as a matrix of columns with bendable connecting elements, and the implant is completely 3D printed out of titanium. It's printed as a straight implant, and when it's introduced into the joint, it simply follows its path, bending as it is advanced, providing a customized result. A set of keels or fins that you can see here on the animation picture anchor into the joint bones and provide the required stability. This, by the way, is the size of the implant. I don't know if you can see it on the camera. And these keels have been proven to provide extraordinary stability. In a biomechanical study that we have conducted, we have shown that the system is capable of performing as well in terms of stability as the standard of care pedicle screw construct. You can see in the table below the results from our study. In yellow, mark the amount of stability or reduction in motion that we are able to obtain with 2 zLOCKs standalone, and in blue, in comparison to a bilateral pedicle screw construct. As you can see, it's comparable values. We're also very proud that our study was published in September in World Neurosurgery magazine. System has also been in clinical use for over 6 years in clinical studies in Europe, showing great long-term pain reduction. I think we're approximately 60 patients by now. In the interim report that was submitted to FDA, we have seen a 92% radiographic evidence of fusion at 12 months for the relevant patient population. So what's the opportunity here? In a market brief that was given a year ago at the MNVC meeting, they said that only about 5% of A-LIF and T-LIF cases are performed at the ASC and estimated to grow to 40% by 2028. zLOCK will participate in this transition for the benefit of all. For the surgeons, being able to bridge between non-fusion and fusion surgery with a small few minutes addition, also being able to bill and code for fusion brings value. For the strategics, zLOCK brings a new niche for those patients who are not screw candidates, also in outpatient and ASC. And most importantly, the patient, enjoying a less invasive, less traumatic procedure with long-lasting outcomes. Patients today are smarter. They search online, and we've seen this numerous times when patients have contacted us through our website, inquiring about the use of the zLOCK and the availability of zLOCK in their area when they were prescribed with pedicle screws. Obviously, it is important to them. So pedicle screws will probably they still are, and they will probably remain the bread and butter of a spine surgeons for stabilization. But it's very encouraging to see new technologies being developed, cleared, and marketed for internal facet fixation. It is obvious that the market understands the value and advantages of this technique, and we're happy to join forces in developing the internal facet fixation market. Internal facet fixation will become a major tool in the surgeon's toolbox. Bear in mind the anatomical challenge that I talked about a minute ago. It is obvious that zLOCK's design makes sense, with its bendability and keels proven to be extremely beneficial. With our custom tool set, creating the slits for the keels to situate in takes only a minute, and they are very small and provide outstanding stability. The system is easy to use, has very low risk of neural damage, is MIS, and provides good bed for bony ingrowth. Our production is efficient. Because our implant is completely 3D printed, the production itself is very simple and the COGS are very low. Our tools are also very efficient with only one tray, which also maintains very low COGS. As painful as it may be, we are in a transition period from our CE certification under MDD to MDR. I honestly don't know when this process will be over, but we are CE certified under MDD for the time being, for this transition period. We've also received our initial clearance in April and also have received another special 510K clearance in September with some production advancements to make the system more producible from our side. I don't know if you've seen in the competition table, but we see zLOCK as a platform technology that can be used for other non-straight joint fusion applications in spine and in extremities. Focusing on our core competence, spine, there are additional 2 applications we can take zLOCK into, cervical spine and SI. We currently have interest in developing the SI application, and have already been approached by market players to develop this project, and we will initiate this given the right partner and funding for the project. Obviously, it's a great value creator for the company. So a few words about our US launch. I was actually supposed to be today in Chicago doing a first cases with the system, but because this was the first system sent to the US, it got delayed in customs, and we've delayed it in a few weeks and probably do it in the beginning of December. But our intention for this controlled launch is to place the system in the hands of approximately 10 selected surgeons for the following items. We want to understand the US surgeons' will to use the system indication-wise, in terms of pathologies and surgical techniques, and suit the system accordingly. We want to integrate with systems in the USOR, such as navigation systems and others. And we want to create traction. We want to showcase the potential of our technology commercially. Our team is experienced in doing exactly what we're doing, developing innovative technology and bringing it into the market. My partners, Professor Floman and Uri Arnin, have done this before in their other company, in the recent company ApiFix, where they have developed an adolescent scoliosis ratchet-based implant that was sold to orthopedic. Uri is also the inventor of the top system that is now marketed by Premier Spine, sorry. Our chairman, Nick Pesciuta, is ex-VP of External Innovations from J&J and has been involved in numerous transactions in orthopedics, including three exits on his own. And our anchor investor, Trendlines, have successfully exited 2 orthopedic companies in the last few years. We're also very proud of our scientific advisory board members, who are nationwide respected surgeons. All of which, by the way, had a chance to use our system in the lab. For me, it was important that they have a chance to put their hands on the system before they decide they want to be behind it. Everything that I told you was until today was done with a total funding of $6 million. Today, we're raising an additional $6 million round A to support us in the coming 2 years for the main purposes of the US launch, obviously, continuing to support our EU clinical study and continue to develop the system. We are also a winner of the EIC blended funding opportunity from Europe, where we received 2.2 million euros as a grant and an additional 3.2 million euros in matching equity investment. So there is still a bit less than 3 million that they will match in this round, which is already committed. So thank you very much. Thank you for your time. I'll take it to the panel for questions, and I'll be happy to speak to anybody about additional details.
Great. Thank you, Ofer.
Yes. Very good, Ofer.
Thank you.
Who wants to start? Paul?
Yes.
All right, you got to be more specific, Chris.
That's true. I can't even say Paul S.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Ofer, this is I saw your presentation at MNVC, and it's, as I mentioned before, it's helpful to hear things twice and get a better sense. One of my questions is in the cases that have been done so far, just speaking from a technical perspective, can you give us any sort of sense of like what are the typical patients and how are the surgeons doing this in a workflow procedure? Frequently, if we're doing a posterior procedure, the facets are arthritic. We remove a lot of the facets, as part of the decompression. I'm curious, are the docs using this so far just as like a supplemental fixation for an inner body? Are they doing this for, much of the pain that I would see in practice is discogenic, sometimes facets, but I'm curious, how are you seeing the workflow so far with the typical cases, if there is one?
So I'll give you a bit of an overview on our study in Europe, but I'll just in parentheses say that exactly that's why it's a part of our controlled launch for the US is understanding that your practice is a bit different than the one in Europe. In our clinical study in Europe, we've done some cases with an inner body, but most of the cases were standalones, where the surgeon would typically start by placing zLOCK bilaterally and then decompress around that to obtain the decompression. And we've seen this to be very efficient. And obviously, like you said, yes, if there are osteophytes, we need to get rid of them. And I would say that the most challenging part of our procedure clinically today, after we've stabilized the technique and the tooling, is finding the facet joint. And which can sometimes be challenging. You know that if you're having a standard C-arm. So what we do, we rely on pre-op CT scan in order to plan the procedure, understand the orientation of the joint. And then we also try to provide this guidance to the surgeon. We believe that with very simple navigation systems, this would become a non-issue and even more simple than it is. After you reach the joint and you incise it, the rest of the procedure is very simple to follow. And so in Europe, we've used it usually as standalone. We have done, 5, 6 cases with an inner body. I believe that in the US, we actually today still, FDA has asked this as sort of a mitigation to come into the market, to indicate it for use with an inner body. So we're currently indicated for use with an inner body, although most of our cases in Europe were done as standalones.
Great. So a quick question that I've got, Ofer, as it relates to you heading into next year and getting the, we'll call it, alpha, beta success that you're trying to achieve. You mentioned that there was 10 surgeons that I'm assuming are going to be your sites, and roughly 60 procedures by the end of Q3 25. Are you wanting it to be that controlled, or do you see opportunity for greater expansion faster? And the second question related to that is, what is your intentions from a channel standpoint?
I'd like you to refine the channel question in a minute. I'll answer the first part and then just understand exactly what you meant with the channel. But regarding the controlled launch, yeah, we want to go slow. We understand that there is a lot of unknown. We know that we have great technology in our hands, and we want to release it in a mature, in a very responsible manner. There's not a lot of room for error. If you start to put out products in the market, then you get wrong indications too fast and you make mistakes. We need to understand, that there's a lot of new things for us coming into the U.S. and we want to learn it together. And I have clearly stated this to every surgeon that we have spoken to about this launch. We want to participate together. We want to understand. Do you want something to be developed to assist you in some place? We've done a lot of cases which were standalones. We're going to see more cases with an inner body. This is going to change. That's
okay.
And regarding channels, we're looking for partnership. I think I'm answering the right question. Let me know if it's not. We're looking for partnerships. We're looking for strategic partnerships. Obviously, for the time being, we are creating sort of our own mini channel, but we have no intention of setting up our own distributorship or marketing channels. Approaching 10 surgeons is something that doesn't require any marketing. It requires understanding who you want to approach him, conduct the lab. If there is interest, great. If there is not, no. But this doesn't require marketing effort, right?
Okay.
It's more of a logistical and accounting support around this to kind of help kick it off.
Got it. Thanks for the clarification.
Yeah, so maybe I'll just follow up on the indications question. So I was likewise interested in what the indications were. I saw that it, is indicated, at least in the U.S., for use with an inner body device. Also limited, at least at this point, to a single level. So right. I guess the question would be, do you see this as a potential multi-level construct as well? Or do you think it's primarily focused on sort of the single level lumbar?
No, we could definitely go into multi-levels. This was, again, a limitation of the FDA. Our intention, our strategy with FDA generally is take what you can and then do a stepwise approach. So we already discussed this. We're working with Maker, with Justin, and we already discussed the next submission, which would be a 1 to 2 level construct. It's not a construct, but 1 to 2 level fusions. It's a matter of supplying more evidence from the clinical study and getting them to approve the safety and efficacy of the device.
And so speaking of kind of clinical evidence, you mentioned radiographic confirmation of fusion. I'm wondering if that was done as a standalone and if your radiographic evidence is at the facets or in the intervertebral body space.
So most of our cases were standalones. So we were looking for facet fusion. This was a bit tricky because looking at a facet joint that has a titanium implant inside has a lot of noise around it. We were working with a radiologist from the US who was doing the examination, and we had our own scale. So what we were looking to see is bone growing into each of the keels. There are 4 keels on both sides, and we scaled that, and we were looking to see bone growing through the implant's oval hole. So we're looking to see both bone growing on the implant and through it as signs of radiographic fusion, and that's how we scaled it. And then we were looking at translational motion and angular motion from flexion extension X-rays.
Great.
Okay, yeah, I guess maybe that would just be my point of caution or concern there is, I don't know how well surgeons are going to view sort of a radiographic indication of incorporation in the facets joints as a true kind of segmental fusion. But perhaps I'm wrong there.
Well, obviously, if you're doing standalone posterior fusion only, that's where you're going to see fusion. If you don't place an inner body, you're not going to have fusion at the front. If you're placing, and this is feedback that I've received from spine surgeons in the US, that when they do place pedicle screws percutaneously, they don't approach the facet joint. So actually, they're not obtaining any posterior fusion. If they want to obtain posterior fusion, they need to widen the incision. They need to approach the joint, open it, prepare it for fusion, place some bone chips inside, and get bony fusion. And I know that some people are using that also, the Providence device. Over the pedicle screws, they're placing an implant into the facet joints for fusion. I believe we're going to see some of these cases with zLOCK as well. It's not necessary from my point of view. I mean, mechanically wise, we can provide the stability with zLOCK standalone. And actually, with the same incision that we're approaching the joint, we are preparing it for fusion, we're stabilizing the segment, and we have the bed for fusion.
Great. Well, thank you, Ofer. Wonderful presentation. We're going to move on. If you want to, there was one question that popped up in the chat, if you want to address that, from Keith Engel. But let's move on to Brad with CytexOrtho. Brad.
Thank you very much, guys, for your time. Sorry.
Thank you, Ofer.
Hey, thanks, Ofer.
Brad, we'll let you take it away.
Okay, great. Hold on one second here. My screen seems to be locked.
Let's see. Yeah, try shutting it down and reloading here.
Let's say let's disable and come back in. Okay. All right, we got it.
Here we go.
All right,
Yep.
great. All right, my name is Brad Estes, and Drew and TJ, thanks for the opportunity to come and present today about what we're doing at CytexOrtho to really renew joints and restore lives of those individuals that are suffering from joint disease at an early age. And this really affects all of us. There are over 30 million Americans who are currently suffering from the most common form of arthritis, which is osteoarthritis, but they're a lot younger than you'd think. 60% are between the ages of 18 and 64. And these patients will avoid joint replacements in general because they'll wear out too quickly, and a joint replacement or a hip implant in this case will require a drastic change in lifestyle if they want to maximize the longevity of the implant. But the problem is that there are no good treatment options for this patient population. And this graph really highlights what the journey of this patient looks like, where I'm plotting treatment complexity on the y-axis and stage of disease on the x-axis. And there are certainly first-line treatment options for these patients, which include physical therapy, over-the-counter pain meds, steroid injections, which are highly controversial, and then arthroscopy. And if we're talking about the hip joint, this has very limited efficacy in changing the long-term outcome for these patients. And these patients are really still staring at a total hip replacement sometime in the distant future. But in those intervening years, there are no treatment options. And our data tell us that the average journey from this first intervention at the doctor's office to late stage OA, where they get a hip replacement, is 7 years. And think about that for a second. 7 years is a long time to live with chronic pain and increasing disability. And we hear this from patients all the time that are living this reality. They're concerned about their future selves with revision, and they don't want to sacrifice the quality of life. And here's just a few comments we get from patients, but we hear this from patients all the time. And Dr. Vail, who's on our clinical advisory board, who was the chair at UCSF for many years, who made a living with joint replacements, said it really well. We need to stop pretending that a total joint replacement is the final answer. It is not. And this is what motivates us to provide a better answer and to provide a solution for those patients who need it most. And we've done that with Renew Hip. This is a solution for the active patient. Instead of replacing the entire joint with synthetic metal and plastics that are supposed to be permanent, we're just dealing with the damaged areas in the joint, restoring the anatomy to what it's intended to be, but then restoring it functionally, as you can see in this animation. And it's designed from the ground up to get these patients back to their active lifestyle as quickly as possible. And then the cool thing is, over 24 to 36 months, the polymer slowly absorbs and is slowly replaced by natural functional tissue. And we think this is the only solution these patients will need. So how do we do that with the Renew Hip implant? How do we restore the anatomy? Well, we do it by combining these two special components. One is this 3D woven textile that you can see here, and the other is this true 3D printed layer, the combination of which mimic healthy cartilage and bone. Now, the 3D woven structure is what started us on our journey. And the awesome thing about 3D weaving is we can make that to match any joint contour of any size and shape in the body. Here you can see proof of concept that we published in PNAS several years back. So we can form cartilage without any loss of mechanical properties. And then we combine this with this 3D printing technology where we have precise control of the deposition of the same polymer. And we need that for basically re-establishing the bone in the joint. And so we call this a smart osteoarthritis fix, because whenever you have disease in the joint and it starts degenerating, we get deformities, and we need to reestablish the correct anatomy. And we do that with our implant. Here you can see the textile, and here you can see the 3D print. And this really differentiates us from other cartilage repair technologies. And here you can see an example of some of our implants. Here are some acetabular implants. You can see curvature in two different planes. Here's the textile, and here's the 3D print. And so what this does is, and this is a micro CT from one of our GOAT studies. You can see where we've restored the anatomy in this micro CT image. And you can also see that we prepare precise pockets for the implant. And so you can see this in this axial view. And I'll show you some histology in just a second to show you how important that is. But if I can sum up the differentiators between us and other cartilage repair technologies, is that we restore the joint contours, as you can see in that image. We integrate with native tissues. We also, the implant is slowly absorbed so that we can transfer that functionality to native tissues, so the patient's left with their own native tissue at the end of the day. And so we showed this in several different animal studies. This is one of our 1-year canine hip OA models, and you don't have to be a pathologist to understand this. But if we do any bone marrow stimulation technique in the femoral head, you get this kind of repair. We haven't restored the sphericity of the joint. With Renew Hip, we restored it nicely. This is at the 1-year time point. We integrated with native tissue. And then we've also restored the compressive properties of cartilage. And the really awesome thing about this is we've already unloaded the implant, and we've transferred that load to new tissue as the implant is degrading or absorbing over that time period. Now, this led to restored activity levels, and we published this in Science Advances several years back. But within 3 months, the animals with Renew Hip were behaving normally, whereas the osteoarthritis control was lame throughout the entire study period. And we showed that with mobility, motion, and the reduction of pain. And this short clip shows you a 7-second video of one of the animals running around with Renew Hip. So pretty successful in all of these animals, and I'm not cherry picking data here. All of the animals look like this. So a little bit more about the market. There are 1 million patients under the age of 65 with chronic hip pain due to osteoarthritis, and this is our target demographic. And we know that only 20% of this patient population will proceed to a total hip replacement at this young age for the reasons we discussed earlier. And that means 80% will choose to live with chronic pain and disability, waiting, just biding their time until they're old enough for a total hip replacement. And this equates to a $5 billion total market by 2030. And currently, CytexOrtho is the only player in this hip preservation market, which gives us some first mover advantages. So if I can summarize those slides, no satisfactory solutions exist. These patients do not want a total hip replacement, and they're seeking real solution. And the TAM is made up of those 20% who proceed to a total hip replacement now, plus the 80% who currently live with pain and chronic disability. And so we're also seeing a trend for total joint arthroplasty rising in young patients. And I know many of you saw this article in the Wall Street Journal because I had so many people send it to me. But we're seeing a significant increase in the number of people under the age of 65 getting joint replacements. And I have good or bad at the top of this, but I'm not going to really give you an opinion on that. But I would say it's ill-advised for two principal reasons. One is the long-term revision rate is almost 30%. I don't think we would be satisfied with that for any other procedure. And the patients do not want to live with the required lifestyle changes. I think the saying goes something like, when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So it's not too surprising that we're seeing a push in this younger patient population by both the strategics and the surgeons, but these patients need better solutions than a total joint replacement at this young age. We're also seeing this hip preservation market is growing, so we can look at it by different measures too. And by the way that hip preservation is currently used, it means injections. This is a $1.2 billion market today, growing at about an 8% CAGR over the next 5 years. And what's interesting is 17 of the major carriers don't reimburse it. AAOS doesn't recommend its use, but these patients are reaching into their own pockets to the tune of $1,600 for 3 injections just because they're desperate for solutions. So this also speaks to the large market opportunity in that same patient population that I was referring to earlier. We've done the DCFs, we've done the modeling. Even with conservative estimates with standard sales models, with surgeons captured, and we're looking at 2.6% market penetration within 6 years, it's still a $190 million market revenue opportunity just because of the large greenfield market opportunity we're trying to address. Now, a little bit about our company. We are validated and award-winning. We're a designated breakthrough device by FDA. We've raised over $18 million in non-dilutive funding. We're published in over 20 peer-reviewed journals, and we have incredible validation from the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons, having won the 2021 Kappa Delta Award, which is given to the founders of CytexOrtho, and that technology is embodied into our implant that went into that award. And then we won the 2024 inaugural Ortho Pitch competition. So just incredible validation from the Academy that says we have technology that has great promise to advance patient care. We have comprehensive IP protection with patent coverage through 2037 in the world's largest markets. And then a little bit about the team. I started my career at Medtronic in spine. Frank is our resident textiles expert, and Farsh is world renowned for his work in regenerative medicine and cartilage tissue engineering. And this was started when the 3 of us were at Duke University. We have an incredible team of advisors with Drs. Clohissy and Bolay, who actually wrote the book on adult hip preservation surgery that you can see in the top corner. And you'll recognize some of the names and photos at the bottom of the rest of our business team. And so it's a team that's learned and cut their teeth at the major medical device strategics and have sat on both sides of the M&A table. So I think we have a team that's really poised for success. I think our exit is through acquisition at some point after we have some clinical data. And there's plenty of examples of that. I won't go into too much detail here, but the acquirer really secures an implant offering for a significantly underserved population. So a little bit about where we've been. We've done a lot with grant funding, with the GLP animal studies, complete biocompatibility testing, design, freeze, manufacture and validation and transfer. We funded part of a human clinical trial through NIH. We have a reimbursement strategy, and I'm really excited that we received IDE approval last month to begin that phase 1 trial. I'm currently raising a bridge financing round using a convertible note. And our timeline looks like this, where next year is all about clinical trials and getting some of that data. And our exit opportunities really scale with that clinical data. And then we have some R&D work to do along the way. And here are some of our milestones that you can see here. Just to conclude, our renewed hip technology is the procedural solution for early stage joint disease. The solution is to replace, not restore. And I'd love to have you guys join us on the journey of improving patient lives. And of course, I'm happy to take your questions. Thank you.
Wonderful presentation. Thank you, Brad. I'll open it to the panel for some questions, and we've got multiple coming through on the chat. First, Chris, Paul.
Yeah, I'll jump in, Brad. Thank you for this talk. And similarly, it's great to see it more than one time, as I was able to see it at MNBC. Just a couple questions, getting something from where it is right now through an IDE. Are there associated codes that your surgeons will use, or will you have to also, in addition, seek de novo billing codes, procedure codes?
So what we'll do is we'll get a Category 3 CPT code before the pivotal trial, and then we'll collect data under that code, and then we'll use that code to get a Category 1 CPT code at launch. So we have a strategy that we've mapped, and the cost of the implant, if we look at the cost of care for a patient over that 8-year journey that I was talking about, if we just look at direct costs, it's about half of what it is for a total hip replacement. So for all stakeholders involved, we'll be able to make our case for a lower cost and better outcomes for the patient. And we have that plan in place. We just have to execute it now.
Yeah, just to follow on that, having, lived through a few of these myself, anything that looks to be a procedure market expansive to an insurance company, which you could argue this may indeed be, because they're going to probably try to deny the total hip till somebody's closer to 65, just based on that.
Right.
It just represents, I know it's not the first thing on your mind, but as you're tacking toward that, understand, right, that it's going to be the code is just the beginning of then getting, authorization follow-up. And I've seen a lot of companies do that, but it's incredibly interesting how much bandwidth they have to pour into regulatory support as that moves up into that part of your transition.
Yeah, I agree. And part of this is all private payer too. So part of that is going to be to interview the payers and really design those studies around what they'll need to see in order to get that reimbursement. And initial conversations are positive there, but we still have to execute it to get those codes in place.
Thank you.
And you are working through MICRA, right?
We are using MICRA for regulatory and our reimbursement strategy. That's correct.
I had a real quick one because there's a lot of good questions that are coming in on the chat. So at the 1 year time frame of the histology slide you were showing, was there ever a check on that histology prior to a year? When were you first noticing change affected by the implant?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we've done studies at 1 month where we check the histology, 6 months, and 1 year. And what we see at 1 month is we see complete cellular infiltration, and we're starting to see tissue development we're seeing integration even at that 1 month time point. The tissue isn't nearly as mature. At 6 months, we're seeing more of a fibrous tissue repair. And then between 6 months and 1 year, we're seeing more bone deposition and we're seeing more cartilage differentiation by that time period. So everything we've seen is that the trajectory is more towards an osteochondral tissue by that 1 year time point. And like I said, we've unloaded it by 1 year. So those natural forces that are causing the homeostasis within the joint, we've already established that at that point. So I don't see any reason why it wouldn't continue along that path, but we only have 1 year data at this point.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I would just maybe make one comment and a question that's going to echo some of the chat questions. The comment maybe just partially tongue in cheek. I just want to go on record. The total hip replacement is a great product and an outcome for patients. We fully support that, but kidding aside, I think this early stage intervention and whole continuum of care is very important. Mm-hmm. But echoing some of the questions on the chat, what was the strategy towards going for hip versus knee? Was that based on loading? Was that based on market opportunity, competitive landscape, etc.? I'm a big fan of staying laser focused at startups and not trying to boil the ocean. But there's an obvious kind of question on, what do you do as well? So I know some other folks have asked the same question, but just interested in perspective there. Yeah,
no, it's a great question. And we get that question all the time. And I would say, we were doing some studies. We started working with a guy at NC State whose expertise was canine, chronic pain, and hips. And so we did a study with him, and part of the data I showed you in the deck, and we just hit it out of the park, and that kind of set us on that trajectory. And then we started working with the clinicians, Drs. Clohisi and Neppel and Bolay, and just there was just a huge need that nobody was addressing in the hip. And we said, we got great data here. Let's go for it. I mean, we would love to pick up those other joints later and we have some background work that's going on right now in knee and other joints. But let's move on hip first, and then we can pick up those other joints later, because it is a platform technology. We can apply it to other joints in the body, but I've had hip preservation guys say, thank you for doing something in the hip, Brad, because there's a big need there.
Hey, Brad, a follow-on question to the the anatomy question that Paul just posed. But even though I am an orthopedic surgeon, I certainly don't know the amount of disease attribution like your experts would on your advisory board. But so when you're looking at inclusion exclusion criteria for your IDE, how much opportunity is there where there's just degeneration contained in the femoral head, where I believe this is where you're aiming mostly, versus if there's how much of this is going to be acetabular and femoral head, and if there's too much acetabular disease, do you have to keep them out of the study because it might confound your results? How are you framing that up?
Yeah, we've kind of put it into segments. So the first in human study is femoral head only. So we're dealing with disease such as FAI, osteonecrosis, trauma, maybe some slight dysplasia in the joint, things like that. And then what we plan on doing is when we get to the phase 2, then we'll start dealing with acetabular lesions as well. And we have implants for both sides of the joint, but the first study is just femoral head for now.
Thank you.
Good. I think we got time for one more question. Panel, is there anything else, or should I pull one from the chat here?
Pull from the chat.
Okay, great. This is a little bit more technical, but how much load can the product sustain, especially when we're considering some of the younger patients that you have in mind? How are you incorporating the strength requirements into the design of the implant?
Yeah, so the implant was designed to be load bearing from day one. Now there are some limitations to that. If we replace the entire femoral head, then no, it couldn't do that. But as long as it's contained with bone surrounded it on the perimeter of the implant, we see no reason why this implant can't function for these patients. And our implants are pretty large. And in the canine studies and the goat studies, we basically had implants that approximated the entire load-bearing area in the femoral head, and so no issues with subsidence or those implants incorporated over time. They function perfectly like that. But that is a deeper question, and if anybody wants to talk about that further, I'm happy to go into more of the mechanics.
And I'll just throw this out there again, Brad, having had the benefit where you had more time and a longer presentation last week in Memphis. But for those of you who haven't seen this, he showed a video where this implant is like a button. It's just slightly bigger than the hole, and it's a press fit. It's pretty interesting how apparently stable this thing is. Yeah. It's not just like floating around on the surface. Right. Maybe you want to elaborate on that. Follow on that question.
We engineer both sides of it, right? So we have the implant that's made to function in the joint, but we also have to implant it correctly so it has the right interface with the biologic tissue so that it can communicate with the cells, and so we can get tissue ingrowth and through the implant. So both are critically important for success, and we've engineered both sides of it for that. And we've shown that, and Paul's right. I mean, these implants don't move, they don't go anywhere, and we get tissue development and that differentiation of that tissue pretty rapidly once it's in the joint.
Great. Well, thank you, Brad. That was a very, very, very good presentation. Appreciate you taking time. Yeah.
TJ, you have any hip pain?
What was that, Chris?
So are you having any hip pain?
No, not yet. Not yet.
Sure, everybody.
You're in that market.
Yeah, I'm in the minority right now. Well, let's move on to our final presentation of the afternoon here with Aditya from Indius Medical. Aditya, thank you.
Good evening, everyone.
Hello.
Can you guys see my screen? Is the presentation up?
We're ready to go.
Yes.
Awesome. Good evening, everyone. My name is Aditya Ingalhalikar. I'm the founder and CEO of Indius Medical Solutions. Thank you to MSK Innovations and thank you to the panel for being here to listen to our pitch. Our main mission is to change the standard of care for children suffering from pediatric spinal scoliosis. And our vision is to become the preeminent pediatric scoliosis patient-specific implants company in the world. In terms of background, 3 million children are diagnosed with scoliosis annually in the United States. In the 5 to 10 years of age, it is classified as early onset scoliosis. and in the 10 to 18 years of age, it is classified as adolescent idiopathic scoliosis. It's a high-risk disease resulting into pain, breathing disorders, eventually leading into cardiac disorders and death. The pediatric scoliosis surgical implants market, there's more than 40,000 surgeries that happen in the United States every year. And it's one of the most highly reimbursed surgeries in the spine arena, with implant billing happening anywhere from $20,000 to $35,000 per surgery, with implant costs only. It is a $1.2 billion US market, and globally it is a $1.4 billion market. Currently, it is dominated. The standard of care is traditional spinal fusion implants, which account for 98% of the market share. And there are certain magnetic technologies like the magic rod in the market, which account for 1 to 2% of the market share. The problem, so what is the problem that we are trying to address? The current surgical treatment involves mechanical distraction connectors, so screws and rods attached across the deformity, attached across the scoliotic deformity, and or magnetic growing rods attached across the scoliotic deformity. The main disadvantages of these distraction connectors as well as magnetic connectors are, it requires, the mechanical distraction connectors require 12 to 14 spinal distraction surgeries over 6 years. And the magnetic rod, the magic rod, requires 12 to 14 non-surgical spinal distraction surgeries over not non-surgeries, but distraction procedures over 6 years. The main disadvantages of both these technologies is that it's a one-size-fits-all solution. The surgeons do not know the growth rate of each child. Every child is different, but it's a one-size-fits-all solution. The current growth rods are locked between two distractions, so they do not respond to daily patient-specific growth. The distraction force, it is well documented through literature that the distraction force increases with each distraction due to scar tissue formation, resulting in increased stress on the implants. The fourth one is if the patient has growth spurt between two distractions, there is a lot of stress on the implants because of which these implants can break. Counteractively, if patients have slow growth rate versus the distraction rate, a new growth rod needs to be implanted because you run out of the free rod space. And not to mention, in terms of surgeries, multiple surgeries, there's infection, anesthesia risks, and rod breakages and high lifetime healthcare costs. Because of all of these disadvantages, today the revision rate, accepted revision rate, is 30 to 40% in both these techniques for treating these children. This is a quick clinical evidence of complications where you see magic rod breakages that have happened. Implant protrusion is a big risk, as well as there is growth rod connector breakage also. The magic rods have a lot of complications which are reported with the US FDA also. There have been recalls in certain markets such as the UK. So what is our solution? Our solution is to develop patient-specific growth data-driven continuous distraction growth rod portfolio. We are developing 3 technologies. It is a technology platform that we have developed. Mechanical growth rods, mechanical actuation, magnetic actuation, and pneumatic growth rods. So what are the key features over here, right? The most important part is the growth rod should respond to daily patient-specific growth, which none of the current technologies do. You have to have a distraction every 6 months. There is a built-in continuous distraction force mechanism. So instead of the surgeon distracting the rod, either through a surgery or through magnetic force, the force mechanism is inbuilt inside the rod. The third one is, right now, the surgeon does not know at what growth rate the child is growing. So in our technology, there are going to be imaging markers, and we are also working on sensor-based technologies, which will be able to give growth data and distraction force data through Bluetooth technology. So there will be continuous monitoring of what is happening inside the implant. The fourth one is the goal of the surgeon. What does the surgeon do? The surgeon maintains distraction force, basis patient-specific growth. So they are not really applying the distraction onto the spine. They are maintaining the internal force in each patient, which will be patient-specific. So the goal is, with all of these features, the benefits are to reduce implant stress and breakage, which means 0 to minimum revision surgeries, optimize distraction procedures, so no secondary growth rod surgery, and nil to minimum repeat surgeries, which will result in lower lifetime healthcare costs. Our competitive advantage is no company in the world today has this technology, and Indius owns all the IP in the field. This is a All right. So that was the video of how the working is going to be. In terms of growth and distraction force data tracking, we have two technologies. One is imaging based markers will be there on the growth rod, which will help us track the growth of the spine, as well as we are working on sensor based markers for growth and distraction force monitoring. In terms of leadership team, we have an exemplary leadership team and R&D team in place. I myself have been in the spine business for the last 20 years now. Prior to starting Indius, I was the director of global product development at Globus Medical, having spent 10 long years at Globus. Education-wise, I have a PhD in spine biomechanics from University of Iowa. So pretty much entrenched in the spine biomechanics field with multiple patents to my credit and research publications in multiple internationally acclaimed journals. Nikhil Butala is our co-founder and chief operating officer. He's ISO 13485 lead certified auditor in terms of quality and has 20 years experience in quality, with an MBA in supply chain and finance from Purdue University. And we have an exemplary product development team in place as well. In terms of board, we have some of the who's who and experienced board members such as Brett Murphy and Rick Barron. Brett Murphy was the ex-VP of sales at Globus Medical, who led Globus through going public and been in the spine business for more than 30 years. Rick Barron was the CFO of Globus Medical, who took the company public in 2012. In terms of stakeholders, we have multiple stakeholders from the US spine industry and academics, such as Andy Iyer, Brett Murphy, Mike Boyer, and Professor Avinash Patwardhan. These are all ex-co-founders of Globus Medical. We have an exemplary surgeon advisory board in place, Dr. Sukin Shah, Dr. Scott Goods, Dr. Upasni, and Dr. Dilip Sen Gupta, who are leading scoliosis surgeons in the country. And we are working on adding more surgeon advisory board members. So in terms of the commercial kit, our focus from a revenue standpoint is not just about the growth rods. The scoliosis commercial kits involves the growth rods, the pedicle screws, connectors, as well as the surgical instruments. So our goal is to make sure that we go into the market and have everything so that we can gain revenue from all of these systems. So the growth rods are currently in development and they're not USFDA approved yet. That is why we are raising the capital. But we already have an innovative and patented pedicle screw system, which is currently already in early clinical validation phase in the United States. It is USFDA approved. We have all these connectors, so deformity implants, USFDA approved, and pediatric scoliosis surgical instruments also USFDA approved and registered. In terms of traction from an intellectual property standpoint, we have more than 16 patents granted in the US, EU, UK, France, Germany, Switzerland, Japan, and India. And we continue to invest heavily in R&D and in patents. Our go-to-market strategy is to launch the pediatric scoliosis allied implants, as we call it, which is the pedicle screws, connectors, into the US market. And then through that, develop surgeon and sales network, generate early revenue, which will be reinvested into the growth rod launch, and then get on a contract for hospital pricing approvals. And eventually moving into launching the mechanical patient-specific growth rods, the magnetic patient-specific growth rods, and the pneumatic patient-specific growth rods. We are currently in an early clinical validation phase. This is the stage. The number one stage is where we are currently at. We have already launched the pedicle screws, connectors, and surgical instruments in the US market and internationally as well. So in terms of US early clinical validation phase, there is commercial traction. We have 200 plus patients treated with our pedicle screw systems, no complaints over the last 1.5 years. And we continue to get approval in certain hospitals across the country. The goal is to grow slow and raise the capital and then go into the market. Simultaneously, we have already launched our pedicle screw and other implants that we have developed. We have a full bag of spinal implants, which we have launched internationally, where more than 4,000 plus patients have been successfully treated globally. Primarily outside of US, it is the India market where we have launched our systems successfully over the last 3 years. In terms of financial projections, our goal over the next 5 years is to build a $50 million company, around $16 million coming from allied implants such as the pedicle screws, and the rest coming primarily around $34 million coming in from the growth rods. That is what our target is and our business plan is. We are currently raising $5 million in Series A capital, majority of which will be directed towards developing and getting approval of the growth rods, and then certain around 20% will be diverted towards commercialization of the pedicle screw systems so that we continue to make forays into the market and develop our sales footprint. In terms of investment activities, this space has been replete with successful investment activities. Ellipse Technologies was acquired by Nuasive a few years back for $400 million. Today, it is a part of the Globus armamentarium after the merger of Globus and Nuasive. Synost, which is a Finnish company, was in the limb lengthening space, was acquired by Globus Medical in 2020 at an IP R&D stage with unproven technological feasibility, which means it was not FDA approved, it was not in clinical use. It was acquired for $25 million. And APFix, which is a company out of Israel, was acquired by Orthopedics a few years back at $45 million when they were in an early clinical phase, which is a small segment scoliosis correction device. So with that, thank you very much. And that is my contact information. I'm based out of Plano, Texas, over here in the United States. And my phone number and email address is there. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, Aditya. Great presentation. Love the technology and the market that you're looking here to serve. Panel, we'll open it up to you for any questions.
Yeah, if I may start, might as well just keep the same cadence going. I don't have any experience with any pediatric scoliosis surgery, especially like the growing rod product, which I believe is kind of the only one that's been, commercialized and that I've seen in the U.S. But if you would first clarify that, do those docs have to reopen to adjust the growth every time, or is there a external way of dynamizing the rod for the magic rod?
For the magic rod, they don't have to reopen it. So once implanted, so you have the primary surgery and all distractions they have to do over the skin. So without any surgery. Yes.
Okay. So along those same lines, then, when I looked, as you showed in your video, the mechanical, the magnetic, and then the pneumatic, I was confused. Like, it looked like you had to open it to get it started, but would you just clarify? Are you priming the rod and then it's ready to go for the whole length of time? Because there's a little confusing to see like a compressor or a screwdriver on that. Is that basically what you're saying? You basically crank it full and it's ready to go for the life of the growth?
So no, we have developed 3 technologies. So let me address the first one, which is directly head to head with a magnetic, which will be non-invasive. Right?
That makes sense.
So the magnetic is completely non-invasive. You do the primary surgery, and all distraction force adjustments that happen, they will be done in a non-invasive way. That's the magnetic one, which is at par with the current magic rods, though they are not the state of the art, but that is the advantage of magic rod. So we have incorporated that in our technology also. So that is number one. However, we have developed a mechanical distraction rod also. The reason we have developed is the magnetic technology is contraindicated for thinner patients, because the magnetic rod has to be subcutaneous. It cannot be submuscular because the strength of the magnets is not as high. Because of that, the magnetic rods can protrude in thinner patients, and so it becomes a contraindication. So for those patients, we have developed a mechanical system where the mechanical system can go in submuscular, because but however, the disadvantage is you have to do a keyhole surgery. But again, it's better than today's standard of care. 98% surgeries even today are done with an open, you have to open up where you use large distractors, right? You use the distraction to distract the connectors. So instead of that, you are using a small keyhole surgery where you just put one screwdriver and drive the mechanism, right? So it's still minimally invasive compared to the standard of care. Yet, yes, it is more invasive than the magnetic technology, right? But the advantage is that it is made for patients who are thin, for which the magnetic technology is a contraindication. And now the third one is the pneumatic one. Honestly, the story of the pneumatic one is the pneumatic is what we started off with. Our all first IP was with pneumatic. But then pneumatic, we all of us know, I mean, as investors, I would like to say that the pneumatic use of gas has not been done in the spinal side. And we expect that FDA would ask for a humanitarian device exemption trial, though it is nitrogen gas and all of that. So we wanted to have technologies where we can go towards the 510K route. And that is why we have the mechanical and magnetic developed. So what I would like to say is that the pneumatic is more today from an IP standpoint. We have already solved the problems of leakage and all of those things. But from an investment perspective, going forward, our main focus is going to be mechanical and magnetic systems.
Great. Thank you.
Sure.
I was just going to ask real quick. Thank you again for the presentation. From a strategic standpoint, as you guys look at Indius, the company, obviously you do have a lot of additional fusion elements that you're including in the product portfolio. Is the primary rationale for that to be revenue producing while you are getting down the road with the 510K approvals? That's the first question. I have one follow-up.
So the first main part is that we don't want to lose out the revenue on the pedicle screws, right? When Ellipse launched magnetic rods, they were dependent on other companies' pedicle screws. And I've been in the spine business for 20 years. So, I mean, we can develop spinal implants, that's what I've been doing for the last 20 years in terms of product development, R&D. So the whole thought process is, and anytime you're building an R&D company, right, you have to be dependent on external funds. So definitely being revenue generating is a positive thing that helps us to make sure that we are independent and we can continue to generate revenue. That is one part. The second part is it helps us to get into the sales network. So we are already getting HCA approvals and things like that. So the company is known in the circles because these days approvals take a lot of time. All of us know it, especially with HCA, it can be a 6 months process. So it has a strategic as well as a revenue generating aspect to it.
Okay, perfect. And
the goal is not to be distracted. Our focus is the growth rods.
Yeah. Okay, makes sense. My last question was when I saw the 510K 12 months for the mechanical, 510K 15 months for the magnet, are you running those concurrently, or is it we're going to get the 510K handled for the mechanical first and then start the magnet? What's sort of kind of the plan there?
So it's being run concurrently. So all development, the mechanical is pretty much, it's going to be quicker. The magnetic is there's going to be certain magnetic testing and it's going to take longer, but they will be running concurrently.
Okay, good. Thanks.
And Chris, I'll follow up your question. I thought you might go. I don't know why I look like a ghost. I have bad internet connection.
It's that Southern California weather.
Apparently, the third device, the hydraulic, was listed either as a humanitarian use exemption or an HD. I can't remember exactly what you said, but given these are fundamentally, I would think the same kind of clinical indications. Why the different regulatory pathway for the hydraulic?
So it's a pneumatic one, just to add that. So there's no liquid. It's going to be a pneumatic. So it's gas based. The reason we expect it to go HD because it's FDA is everything is based on it's on the basis of risk, right? So we envisage that the risk on the pneumatic is going to be perceived higher, though we are using nitrogen gas, and nitrogen has been used in other areas such as laparoscopic surgeries and things like that. So the worst case, what can happen in a pneumatic device is there is leakage. But FDA being conservative, we expect that they would ask us to go the HDE route. On the mechanical and magnetic, we don't expect that because there are predecessors. So we can have a 510K pathway in that particular direction. Okay, and then that limits you to the 10,000 patients a year? Is that right? No, HDE would limit to 4,000 patients a year, but 510K is all open. Yep. Got it. But even then, 4,000 patients, and 4,000 patients is a lot of pediatric patients, a year. So it's not less. So even business-wise, that's not a restriction.
Great. We do have one question I'd like to bring in from the chat. How do you think that this treatment approach compares with something like Tether from High Ridge, which doesn't require some of those ongoing adjustments?
Right. So the Tether's primary indication is adolescent idiopathic scoliosis and not early onset scoliosis. The growth rod indication is early onset scoliosis. So the Tether is more of a growth modulation device, and hence it does not require, because it's in the later part of the child's growth stage. It's in the later stage, So that is the main difference. So completely different indications, completely different devices.
Great. Any other last questions here? All right. Well, thank you, Aditya. Great presentation. Just want to thank all of our presenters. Ofer, thank you for staying up late. Really appreciate your commitment to being here. Brad, wonderful presentation. Aditya, thank you all. Thank you to our panelists, Paul, Chris. Wonderful time this afternoon. Please reach out to any of the presenters if you have additional questions, or to our team, to Drew or myself. We look forward to having you at the next event, December 4th. We have it on the website. If you can go ahead and RSVP, we'd love to see you there. Otherwise, we thank you all for your time and attention. Great questions. Have a great night. Thank you all.
Great.
Thank
Thank you very
you.
much
Good
for
job,
it.
TJ.
Thanks,
guys.
everyone.
Thanks, TJ.
Good night. Thanks, TJ.
Good night.